Mostly Productions.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. By then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. We are going to this is a throwback episode, so we're just flying right into it. We're going to be reviewing the episode about Dave Smith that we did like a year ago, the one that Phil Labonte said was like C-list bullshit, like early podcasting day stuff. I thought it was an okay episode. I thought it was better than he could do, but it comes on the heels. I mean, as we re-air it, it's coming on the heels of Dave's very famous debates, which he's kind of known for doing with what is his name? Douglas Kike Murray. I forgot his name.
I think that was it. I didn't know it was a Douglas K. Murray, but yeah, I mean that was him.
That was the guy. Yeah. So he had this debate. What do you think about it from the layman's perspective? What did you think about what you saw there?
Well, I didn't watch it.
Okay,
and that's mostly because, it's debate. I actually hung up my appetite, whatever appetite there ever was for debate, many, many years ago because of Joe Rogan's podcast, because he had somebody on who was talking about, it was two people. One was representing the plant-based diet. The other one was representing the carnivore diet.
Oh, yeah.
And what I discovered was, despite having subjected myself to that 4-hour debate, and despite having subjected myself to previous hours worth of content on diet and nutrition via the Joe Rogan podcast, I still couldn't definitively say that one was the winner and one wasn't. You know what I mean? Like, it was like there was no definitive answer still after all that time invested. And I realized then that the nature of debate, just the language that people use, it makes it so that it's not really ever about the information. It's about almost like tricking your opponent and getting an advantage over them and kind of like smearing them, straw manning them. There's like all kinds of smearing them. Yeah. There's all kinds of debate tactics that make it so that if you can see them, you realize that this is not going to change your mind. And this is just about, it almost evolves into like character assassination. It's ultimately a popularity contest by the end of it. And
this is actually that's a good point to bring in this debate. I'll show you this video of this debate because it's what happened in the Joe Rogan debate. So here we go. You'll see what's going on here. So Douglas Murray is actually debating Douglas Murray on the veracity of using, experts and people who weren't there for their opinion. So here we go.
Have you been to the crossing points?
I really resent that form of argumentation.
When were you last there at all?
Sure.
I really resent it.
You should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
This is not an attractive invitation.
I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you spend a career talking about something.
I have the right to talk about whatever the hell I want. And no one's going to stop me or try to intimidate me. And I think that if I said to somebody else the other way around, it would be equally reprehensible.
I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
If I said, shut up, you have no right to criticize anything that Douglas Murray says because...
Hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay, it's not an exact comparison, but seriously, is that a reasonable form of argument? No. In that case, nobody can talk about anything. We might as well pack up, go home and isolate ourselves.
If you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, if you've never seen any of this going on.
I mean, there are some people who've written about there are people who've written about the Holocaust who didn't experience the Holocaust and have written about it better than people who did.
But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit, whilst developing all of these views about it.
This idea that the lived experience has to triumph over everything else is not always correct.
Should at least know what it is, what the territory is, what the situation is in the region.
So there's an irony to this, but let's skate over the irony.
It's hilarious. So this clip was actually juxtaposed by Tyler Yankee at
That was
first.
Tyler's doing?
No, well, he had taken the both clips of that entire interview. He's talking to Lex Friedman. Thank God we didn't have to listen to Lex Friedman.
God, yeah.
And when he's talking to Dave Smith in the Joe Rogan Experience with the red background, obviously, his idea to Dave was that you're not allowed to speak on these things because you haven't even visited the region. So, number one, you have to be an expert to talk about these things. If you're not an expert, you're just a guy saying stuff. Or he called Dave a comedian multiple times and just like insulted him this way. And then Dave didn't have the wherewithal, I suppose, to push back and be like, you're a British, literally. And he just kind of let him do that, which I'm like, that was just beyond the pale. Like, you let this guy call you whatever, and he kind of just got away with it. You should have, whatever. So he goes on to say, like, you have to be an expert to talk about stuff. Otherwise, your opinion's invalid. But on this other podcast here, he's saying, he's like, I resent that completely, that you have to have lived experience to talk about it. Because the idea back then was you're talking about black issues, but you're a British guy, so you shouldn't be able to. And he's like, I resent
that was the context
completely.
of that
Yeah.
clip. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so again, like, debate is like it's nothing ever truthful. It's just to win an argument. It's never to even make a solid point. And this dude,
everybody's so slippery in a debate. It's like trying to grab that like really wet soap, or something. It feels like that's the objective, is to squirm out of your opponent's grasp over and over again. It's a matter of like trying to pin down your opponent and accuse them of something, or say that they misrepresented something or they misunderstood something, and their entire thing is just to squirm out of that. It feels very much like it's verbal wrestling, like actual like Greco-Roman verbal wrestling.
Yeah, but both guys are lubed up, and in this exchange, Dave, your wrestling partner is a gay man.
Yeah.
So, which makes this extraordinarily, exponentially more than it should have to been.
Shouldn't it? Doesn't that, I don't know this guy Douglas Murray, but I'm imagining that this is his modality, right? When he becomes when he gets into a public speaking sort of a situation, he's combative or he's using debate tactics, but like, he just strikes me as somebody that this is his thing. And look, you're not going to get on Rogan and have a debate if it's not your thing, if you're not into doing or familiar with debating. And so it strikes me as significant that if he has carved out a career or any notoriety by way of debate, but then you look at his own opinions and they're completely in opposition to one another, to the extent where you can make him debate himself if you clip it the right way, that should tell you everything you need to know about debate. Is it can make a man who is deceitful successful.
Yeah, he's extremely deceitful. So the way this argument went is he came in to the debate and immediately called out like Jake Shields and Ian Carroll. I think Ian Carroll might be. He called him out. He called out
Ian
Dave
Carroll?
Smith, possibly. He called out Dave Smith for being just a comedian, but talking about things that might bring up harmful issues. So it's like, he basically, his argument to Joe Rogan, he wasn't even talking to Dave. He was talking directly to Joe, and he was like, how come you give these people a platform and they do these things? Like, you should really think about this before you do this. So it was a struggle session for like 30, 40 minutes. So he's super. Then it got to the point where, Dave's whole point was like, hey, they're murdering kids, babies in Gaza just to try to flush out terrorism, which this guy actually admits that, like, you're never going to get rid of this terrorist agency. It's an idea. It's not a government. You're just you're making more of them by doing this. But what you're doing is bombing them. And he's like, oh, well, there's a cost. So then Dave's like, okay, so is the cost 15,000 children, with their limbs and heads blown off? Is that the cost? Because if it's the cost, then just say yes. And then we can agree to disagree and move on. And the guy's just very slippery. I reject the premise, this kind of thing. I reject the premise of that. And it's like, see, how does that feel, Dave? How does it feel to have your premise rejected?
Well, that was the thing that I noticed about Dave Smith, who I am a fan of, but I recognize that no one has ever communicated with me in that way. And I mean that very seriously. I've communicated with, it's not like my show was big, but I used to interview people all the time. I've interviewed over hundreds of people. Not a huge accomplishment by any stretch, but it's like I've got a pretty good sample size of how people tend to interact with me. There are those who have, I'm not saying this is Dave, but there are those who have something to hide, and me and those people don't really mesh that well. But there are those who are like really genuine and don't have any kind of baggage going into an interaction with me. Those people mesh really well with me. This is the first time I had anybody say anything to me like, I reject the premise, to which I wanted to respond, I don't understand the statement. And I mean that seriously, like, I'm stupid. I've never had anybody say to me in conversation that they reject my premise. I'm like, that's, I feel like I just got hit with like a robot. Like, it was actually a frustrating episode because it felt a lot like I was dealing with somebody who couldn't answer the question, what if you didn't have breakfast this morning? Right. And it
Yep.
was like, instead of saying like, but I did have breakfast, it's them saying, I reject the premise of that question. It's like,
Because here's what happened. I guess so. You guys will be listening to the episode in a couple of minutes. At this will be paired with the episode of Dave Smith and Clint Russell and us, right after. But I think something similar happened here. And again, I don't want to like, talk about Dave and all this. But I mean, whatever. We'll do it anyway. This is something that I do on Tower Gang where I'm making fun. But I think what happened here with Douglas Murray, Dave had a debate with him that attacked this weird underbelly of his ideology, and that's Israel. In at the very bottom of it, people were like, "Oh, this debate was about experts. This debate was about lived experience. This debate was about, I don't know, war in the middle." No, it was
this
about
is about,
unfortunately, it was about this guy is married to a he's been to Israel. He's been given awards. He's specifically been given awards for his courageous, outspoken rhetoric after October 7th, the October 7th attacks, which he was also allowed to squirm out of with Dave. Dave was like, "Hey, listen, there's some evidence here that of Netanyahu and the guy Ehud Barak, the guy that preceded him, saying that they actually supported the funding of Hamas
mm,
in Gaza. They supported that for whatever reason. I don't know. They supported it. So now when I look at the October 7th attacks and I'm like, oh, wow, what a tragedy. So a bunch of guys with on their heads. And I think like the original thing was that they came in with like
hang
paragliders with
gliders.
fans, yeah, hand gliders with fans on their backs and like, Uzis. And they shot this place up. And I was like, oh, but they did that. They flew into a rave and then they breached your border, your Iron Dome.
Yeah.
And they were there for 7 hours before there was a
Yep.
response. I
Yep.
don't know how big Israel is, but I assume that you probably have like within 30 minutes, the IDF is pretty much anywhere. So 7 hours, no response from an organization that you guys are on recorded, saying that you support the funding of. As a conspiracy theorist, it sounds awful lot like you wanted that to happen so that
Mhm.
you could do this response.
Right.
But Douglas Murray rejected the premise immediately. He's like, I reject the premise. It's asinine that you would say that Israel supported the funding of Hamas, the terrorist agency. Is like, but they did with his own words. And then he even goes further to say the gaslighting in this episode was tremendous. But he even goes further to say like, oh, so you'll just cherry pick so when the IDF says something or when Mossad says something, then you just believe it then. And
Mm.
Dave's like, yeah, I kind of believe when they tell me the things that they're doing wrong and they kind of just let that slip. I believe that. And then I also parse through their lies. But anyway, getting off track here. What happened was is that Dave and Doug had this debate where it's almost indefensible, especially at this point where because it's been laid bare that Israel is just kind of demonic, kind of
Mm.
garbage. And with it wasn't even a debate with Dave. I wanted to have a discussion, but it kind of turned a little contentious because you started getting frustrated with them. It was
Yeah.
about God and liberty,
Mhm.
and can these two things coexist? And I know Dave, his son had surgery from as a child, and he saw that as like a miracle. Like he's seeing his
Yeah.
daughter born was like he was like, this is a miracle. He's like, I started to believe in that there was a God. Period.
That was my question to Dave was in regards to the tenacity that he absorbs, political literature and works constantly to have this understanding of geopolitics and things like that. Um if you have this big moment where you realize that God is real because you've had a child, how does that realization not take precedence, at least in regards to your fascination? You know what I mean? Like it's like, and that's real. I was just trying to, and then of course he's rejecting that premise. I believe was his actual response to
Yeah, but
that.
I don't even understand the premise that was being rejected there. I should re-listen to the episode, but
It
what
was hard
exactly?
because I think I kind of laid back for the first half, and then once we started wading into more like religious, spiritual waters and conspiratorial waters, is when I started to pipe up a little bit. But
It
I
was a
was like I
weird
said,
it's a weird interview for Dave because like so he knows me from the like a libertarian background and I brought him on and I told him that I wanted what I wanted to talk about. He was it was off the heels of the debate that he had with that guy Andrew from
yeah, I wanted to talk about that. The COVID lockdown era debate with Andrew Cuomo
no,
was
the other Andrew.
oh Anthony Cuomo. Um, Wait, the
Yeah.
other Andrew.
Was
I'm
it
talking about
Anthony?
the one of them is a CNN reporter and the other one was the governor of New York.
No, the guy that pushed him on he's on like the whatever show. We were supposed to interview his wife,
Oh,
something
he had a debate with Andrew Wilson, I think is that
maybe
guy's
his
last
last
name.
name. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Andrew was not fair in that debate, but it was very much like a debate or an argument on like religious ends, sort of
Yeah.
like how this coincides with liberty. They were talking past each other, and then Andrew used a bunch of debate tactics that I was like, this is just like not going anywhere, and it was just very weird.
Yeah.
So I was like, I told Dave, I was like, I want to discuss this stuff with you, and he said, yeah, to come on to discuss that. But I still think that maybe he forgot, but he's like, "Oh yeah, top is we're going to talk about Rothbard." I'm like, "I'm not talking about Mises or Rothbard. Like I've done that before. I've been on like Josh Smith's show with this guy, and I don't want to do that. We're past that." So he brought that up a couple of times, and I was like, well, "That
Yeah.
doesn't matter here. I don't care what some dead Jew said. I'm talking about a different dead and what
Well, you
they
know what
said."
the thing is like I recognize that some of these people are used to being put in a position where like motherfuckers are going to try to gotcha. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And like I don't operate that way. I don't have a history of walking anybody into a trap or anything like that. Literally hasn't happened. Never done it once. And so it's weird because all I do is set out to have a genuine interaction with somebody. And when I'm meeting like debate tactics, I'm like, this is autopilot. This is a routine that you've worked at and
yeah.
developed. This isn't genuine. This is how you navigate people who are trying to like, catch you in some salacious moment. Not my mo. Trying to have a conversation about God with
Yeah,
you.
I really want to know I want to know how you think like he just wasn't understanding. I was like, how does God mix with this idea of liberty? Because when you look at the libertarian movement and what it is and what it's become, especially, you go, how did this thing fail so badly? And it's like because I call it some people call it Satanism. What does it say? Not walk us until a trap. Uh what was the pick about an hour ago? Yeah, no, we asked you if you wanted to see that, Hinchy.
Yeah,
You
we
guys said
tried
one,
to.
two, three, which means
We
yes.
did it. That's true. Yeah,
You've
we did.
consented technically.
Kinchy, I believe you typed in 1, 2, 3. I remember that.
Yeah, you did. Don't make me pull up the receipts, baby boy.
That's
Uh,
fine.
so with Dave, and the idea of like liberty and the libertarianism and what like the fruit that it's bore, we were asking like how these two things coincide because as I was saying, some people call libertarianism like close to Satanism or even
Yeah.
yeah, close to Crowleyism. Crowley's ideology, do as thou will, and it does. But it also is very close to the Christian ethos. Is there's a thing here? There's this small linchpin where I think if you put like God right in the center of libertarianism, it would make a lot of sense.
Mm,
But they have removed it completely and thrown it away because they're like, oh, no authority, no rulers, no leaders. It's like, okay, but there is,
yeah.
and you're going to have to choose one. So you've chosen none, which means you've chosen everything else but God. That's
Mhm.
the reality of it. And then you see what it gets you. You get a gay dude and a cop as your presidential candidate. You get a bunch of people with jean jackets and pins on. They smell, they can't brush their teeth. They're all and they're largely confused. So the question that I was asking Dave in that interview, or like that we were trying to get, what I was trying to get at, I don't know exactly what you were trying to ask him, but I was like, why, if this like this integral part is right here, and you believe in it, why do you shy away from it so much? I know it's not going to be popular,
Mm.
but the reality is there's a bunch of young men and women in this movement here that are completely lost. You've
Yeah.
seen it. He's traveled the country and seen everything that they have to offer. You go to
Mhm.
the national convention and you're like, geez, man, this is pathetic. And
People need God.
people they need God in there. But like if you went in there and you started to like preach God,
Oh, yeah, it
it
would never
wouldn't
work. They'd
no, they
screech.
would it would be like an exorcism. But the thing that
Yeah.
I do like what I like about Dave though is that he does a thing where like when I look at him and I see him talk and I see how he behaves, he is he's exemplifying God, in my opinion,
Mm.
in his actions, how he behaves with his marriage, with his children, with the way he carries himself. I'm like, yeah, that's like these are all of the qualities that somebody who believes in God
Right.
would present with. But and again, I'm not being like go out there and preach the gospel, Dave. But I was just trying to have a conversation about like I think this is important to put here, and I think that he is doing it the same way I told Clint a long time ago. He was like, I don't believe in God, and I was like, but you act as if you do. And he's like,
Mm.
I don't know what that means, and I was like, well, look at when you walk around, you act as if you do believe in God, that there is a higher power. You're put together. You're creating examples for like the greater good. Now there's like a difference between acting like you believe in God and then actively believing in God,
Mm.
because I feel like you take the next step there, and then the next step also is like just telling people like, I believe in God. I think that that's really important in this puzzle that we're trying to put together, and I feel like that's what I was trying to express to Dave. We had some like communication issues with like my microphone at the time for whatever reason. You'll see
Oh,
I get
yeah, it was
off.
ducking you out,
It
which
was
meant that they couldn't hear you when you were trying to, like, interject or even start a point. The whole
very
thing was
frustrating.
frustrating in that way, and I don't know, I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, and it just my question was a really simple one, which was and I understand why he can't do it, if he can't do it, but my question was more along the lines of, like, if you've
Did
seen
you
this
see
thing.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. If you've seen it, why aren't you moving towards it? And I know if you, especially Dave Smith, you think about it, he comes from a comedy and a politics place, right? That's his place, and
Also,
those two
so
spaces.
he was an atheistic Brooklyn kid that had a Jewish mother, not raised Jewish, but atheistic in the left wing New York City comedy crowd.
Yeah.
So I get it, but hey,
But
man,
that's what
you've
I'm
seen it
saying is
yourself.
like, I think that is, and I think that's why look, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze Dave Smith. Um, but part of me feels like that's why I ran into that weird labyrinth of debate speak, which wasn't very extensive. It's not like he did this to me over and over again. It happened probably like a good 3 times, whatever. But it was like a stopper in the momentum of the conversation. And I felt as though it was a defense mechanism instead of like an actual intrigue and exploration of a topic. It was like for some reason a shield was going up at the mention of it. And I think that that shield probably exists because of comedy, New York City, atheism, left leaning politics, all
A
that
little
shit.
bit. I feel like though, because he's I know he's discussed it with Lewis, and Lewis is like, Lewis is I don't know what he believes, but he's just not. He doesn't even want to entertain that. He doesn't like to entertain the politics. Doesn't like to entertain the religious. He's very happy in his little bubble, and that's fine, you
Mhm.
know. But when you step into the political realm and you're trying to do this like changing of humanity kind of thing, you're gonna have to deal with these issues. So like
Yeah.
Lewis, if like when I talk to him, I'm like, "Oh, but why would I ever bring that up with him? We're talking about dick jokes. You know what I
Right.
mean? We'll keep it contextual there. But with Dave, when you're talking about this bigger picture, then you have to mention this. And I feel like what we were talking about, this idea of not necessarily religion, but like spirituality, it
Yeah.
goes hand in hand with liberty, but it sweeps the leg of the libertarian movement. So
Yeah.
to address it, like to address your question head on, would mean that he would have to then, in some ways, he would have to like not renounce, but like step back from some of these ideas, these
Yeah.
libertarian ideas, which are part of his personality and he holds a lot of conviction with, which I think a lot of the libertarian ideas are possible within the realm of believing in God. Well, maybe not like, uh like having like, it's okay if we're, shit like that. It's like
Right.
It's not. There has to be some sort of moral boundaries.
Yeah, it
And
should be like, there it's kind of leading with the spirit of like rebellion and liberation, which is understandable. Rebel and liberate yourself from mankind, I suppose. But there has to be an authority, and that authority is God. And if you don't reel it in at the appropriate time, then it just becomes, what liberate me from all things, God's order and man's order. But even the man's order thing is like I'm realizing that God does place into position not only powers and principalities, but also kings.
mhm.
And so, I'm not saying that that's what is happening now. I don't know if that's what the president is, but I know that there's a history of that happening. And so, maybe we should make it rebel and liberate yourself against everyone who's not, walking in the word of God. You know what I mean? Like that should probably be a good marker. Is if somebody claims to be anointed in one way or another, well, then you observe them. And if they are leading with God, then maybe you're not forced to rebel against everybody. Cause I have that in me. I used to, school was really hard for me because I couldn't have like authority figures telling me what to do. Um, and so I've always had that like spirit of rebellion, but I recognize that that's, the rebellion, the angels rebelling against God, or even the whole, uh, uh, don't tread on me thing. And it's a snake. And then it's like, Jesus Christ gave us the authority to tread on serpents and scorpions. But for some reason, don't tread on me is part of this conversation. And then even the torch, the symbol of libertarian values is like, well, that's huge, right? The Promethean flame, the Mithras or Lucifer, the light bearer, or any of these things, like all those together, they start to make something really weird. And then, like you said before, it's like libertarians lead with, do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody and you're not hurting children.
Yeah, the non-aggression principle is similar to "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And even in like Crowleyanism, they're talking about like but don't hurt people, like don't
Yeah.
that they don't steal their like be ethical, but do what thou wilt. And it's like no, halfway. I agree with you. Like don't hurt people, don't take their. But there's a lot of other stuff with what thou wilt.
Yeah.
Like you're performing uh
Yeah. Anal
anal sex
portal magic.
rituals, portal magic in the Lower East Side of Manhattan,
Yeah.
like just below a copper statue of Lucifer the Rebellion holding a torch. I just don't think that this is good for the greater good of people. But this is that's another
But it's
conversation. And
genius, really, because it's packaged as a lot of good things. It's only when you expand those values into the macro, because they work really well in the micro, right? As far as like small government and not allowing the federal government to do this, and what like everything in the micro works. But as soon as you enter the macro and you start talking about God, that's yeah. There you go. JC
so
says some libertarians believe in consenting children,
now
right?
that's
So there has to be a line.
like when I was in libertarianism, that was the line was like, oh well, there's like some libertarians are like clear-headed and they really know what they're talking about, and other ones are talking about child consent laws. And it's like, yeah, certainly there's levels, but that's you're going to get that when you're given free will. And I like again, so libertarianism, I think where it's great is the ability of the ability to give people their agency and free will.
Right.
I do like the do what thou wilt, but then it needs to come with a lot of caveats. It's like, but if
Up
you do
until
this,
what point?
yeah, I'm saying like, no, do what you want to do, but these are the repercussions of your actions.
Mm.
Like this is what you're gonna get. And as a matter of fact, if you're gonna go do that stuff, you're not welcome in my society. This is like Hans Hermann Hoppe sort of an idea where libertarianism does work, but it's like, there's going to be strict boundaries and rule sets. Like even God allowed us to do what we will.
Yeah.
He allowed us like, and that's the point of this whole thing, right? Like you have to choose him. He can't force you, but it's like if you're presenting this to people and you're telling, or like largely people, a group of young men and some woman that do whatever you want, just don't hurt people. Like, well, where they're man, like we've seen these people, like they're going to take that to the maximum, and it's not going to create anything good. There's
Right.
got to be moral boundaries, and it's not popular with a lot of the people with the lady with pink hair and the Statue of Liberty on her head that's screaming about whatever. It's not going to be popular with her. It's not going to be popular with the snaggletooth dude that won the election. It's not
Right.
going to be popular with the cop or the guy that's walking through the forest yelling at himself before a
But
debate.
if you don't go in that direction, then that right there, those things you just described are the fruits of your party.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at with him. But it's I think if you were to address it exactly, it's not a it's there's no way to win that argument. But you're getting into like this moral philosophy as well.
It's very philosophical, yeah,
Yeah,
and it's not like there would have been an answer. That's a conversation I would have actually liked to have had with him. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the conversation. Honored that he would spend any time talking to us, and he is somebody who I really enjoy and
literally
respect.
the fruits of the party.
Right, literally, literally.
Yeah, no, it was a great conversation, even though, like, because again, so my microphone was ducking. So whenever they were talking, I was underneath them and I'm talking, but no one could hear me. And it's like
Yeah,
very frustrating. There was a technical issue, but I wish that I would have been able to guide the conversation more because like we got stuck a bunch of times. You and Dave got stuck because, and that was a beautiful part too. Dave, like you were like, I don't really give a about Dave Smith because I'm not like I didn't come up in this space. I understand the respect that he has, but like whatever. And that's
right.
you need that when you're talking with somebody of Dave's size. You definitely need that I don't give a kind of thing. And
Well,
I
you know what
was
it was? It was less of the I don't give a and more of I'm genuinely interested in what you think
asking
on
a
this
question.
topic, but
Yeah,
we can't get past this. And so my job then is to refine my question and figure out how to slip it in a different way. If you're not
yeah.
going to answer it because of this aspect, then I've got to refine it. It's got to go back to the drawing board and I've got to spit it back out to you in a way that hopefully resonates with you. And so if I came off as not giving a, it was more like I am in this for the love of truth. I don't really care about individuals. And I, obviously I respect people and I'm grateful for their time and things like that. But if I give a shit at all about Dave Smith, it's because I think his brain works well. And I would love to see what he thinks about this if I present it to him. And for whatever reason, probably for what the first time in my life, certainly not the last, I was unable to package this in a way that was palatable for the person so they were going to receive it, chew on it, and then give me back something cool. It just wasn't happening. He was going, nope, I reject that dish. That is a disgusting dish. I'll not have anything. Like I prepared
It
this pretty
was
strenuously, but back to the kitchen. I'll refine it. We'll spit it out again. And it just wasn't happening.
it was a conversation that I think we would have gotten a lot more out of, and I would much rather have in private, not
Yeah.
recorded. Literally, what do you think? You have a very huge following. You're super influential. He was influential in a lot of my thought coming up as well. Even though, like, I guess as I would just got into it, he was kind of like coming up in the space as well. So like very influential what I think, but I was like, I want to know what you think. Like I don't
Yeah.
even listen to the show anymore. I really do. I'm curious. And if that can't be recorded because it's like, private position, public position, fine. But what the hell do you like where are you at? So I know your heart and I know when you're saying something, I know how to translate it. You know what I mean? I know where it's coming
Yeah,
from.
because it's like, you know what I wanna hear? And if I would have loved to have gotten here, Dave Smith, you've been looking at politics so closely for so long. Where does your mind go when you find out about child rings that are steeped in occult esoteric symbolism and ceremony? What
Yeah.
does your mind think when you hear about the laptop leaks and the weird that they supposedly found in Iraq and all of this strange artwork in the Podesta's homes? Like, where does your mind go? But like, it's just, in my opinion, if you go there and you start having that conversation, especially with people that you don't know and trust that intimately, you run the risk of up this other that you've established for yourself because
Yeah.
you have to maintain an air of seriousness if you're going to talk about politics, an air of seriousness if you're going to
It's
talk
kind of
about
funny, right?
finances.
Because like politics, fight so the money's fake, politics are and
Yeah.
and
It's
what's
all theater.
considered
Everybody's playing pretend, but you have to be very serious when you play
yeah,
pretend.
and what's considered unserious is talking about God and like the metaphysical realm, which certainly exists, and I feel like where every people are becoming a lot more aware of it. But that's just something that I feel like is going to come as time goes by. But I'm glad that we got to have the conversation with Dave about that. In a
We
lot of
could run it
ways,
back one day.
yeah, maybe not. I mean, probably. What's his name?
After that, he was like, "Nah, I'm not going to be coming back to
Phil.
that."
Phil
Oh
Labonte's in
yeah,
his
Phil
ear, like,
Labonte.
"See, I
Yeah.
told you." Imagine having that conversation with Phil Labonte. It would go nowhere.
Ugh.
Just a empty space. Um, but the conversation we had with Dave was a lot like the one that he had with Douglas Murray, but I feel like our was we're dealing with an even more important question than just this and the idea of whatever Israel is, and which is what they were talking about. We're dealing with the concept of God and the concept of free will.
Yeah.
And it was like very much like just butting heads. We were talking around and over each other. And I was a little frustrated by the conversation, by the technology not working, just by how the conversation went. I think Dave was frustrated by how his conversation went with Douglas Murray, because the guy Douglas Murray, no matter what you think about him, he's a smart dude. And it wasn't even a debate. It wasn't even a conversation. It was just, the guy was just dancing. The guy was doing like ad hominem attacks on him. He was just, doing like weird equations, like referring to the experts. It's like, it was
you know how I want to remember Dave Smith? Not from this episode, because he didn't know what he was getting into, and it's all very jarring. He doesn't owe us anything. He doesn't know me at all.
That's the thing. It was like, if I would have told him, I should have told him like come here for a debate, so that way, because I don't want to debate you. And Dave's not going to use those sort of tactics most of the time. But I think if we would have prepared him like, hey, this might be a little bit like, this is a hard conversation. I'm not going to have you on like, who's Dave Smith? Tell us about. No, that's, everybody knows you. Like, I want to talk about something unique. Yes. And I don't think that he was prepared to address it. So it is what it is.
This was after, and this was what I was getting at, the version of Dave Smith that I want to remember. I'm pretty sure this podcast that we did with him was after he destroyed Cuomo over the lockdown era. Yeah. And it was incredible. I mean, a lot of it was that should have been said to Cuomo a long time ago, should have been out on the world. But Dave Smith was the guy who, as soon as the smoke settled, I guess this was almost a year ago as well, or a little bit over a year ago, and we finally got some reckoning. We finally got somebody to hold accountable. And obviously, there needs to be more done. But having, I think it was Anthony Cuomo, on stage with Dave Smith. Chris Cuomo. There we go. Chris Cuomo on stage with Dave Smith, debating the lockdown era, and Dave Smith being like, you and your cohorts said X, Y, and Z. You said that 2 weeks to flatten the curve. You said that it was 100% effective. You said all these things. And he goes, I never said those things. And Dave turns and goes, play the clip.
Yeah.
What? Oh my God. I mean, and then just in his own face, out of his own, in his own words, Chris Cuomo says exactly what he denied having said. And it was so plain to see for anybody who was watching that. I live streamed that entire conversation, and it was great. So that's the Dave Smith that I want to remember. And I don't begrudge him at all. I know he was in a strange position with us. It was different. It's not something he's accustomed to.
So that's the thing. Dave Smith is so great. I think he's great on almost on everything, pretty much, you ask. But why would I want to have a conversation about something like, I have you on and I just go, I agree. Like, I want to have an actual conversation with you about something that maybe we don't necessarily agree. Maybe even I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. But it didn't get. I don't think it got there adequately, which is fine.
We didn't get that far.
Maybe that's our fault. But I thought it was fun, and Dave's a champ for spending the time with us. So without further ado, here's the episode with Dave Smith. This is transition music.
All right, what else are we doing? Do we have anything else to do? I gotta sneeze.
I think that's it. I think we're done. Don't sneeze.
I need the light to do it.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll laugh in the face of